Welcome to episode 120 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Max Landis about his new film, Mr. Right. Max is one of the hottest screenwriters right now, and the script for Mr. Right is one of the spec scripts that kicked off this hot streak. We dig into the process of how he wrote this script, so stay tuned for that. And before that, we have a special segment today. During my Kickstarter campaign, one of the rewards was a review of the first 5 pages of a screenplay that a writer submitted. I had 2 people who contributed for this reward, and this is the first of the 2, so stay tuned for that as well. I'm going to be reviewing these 5 pages, and you can hear my notes on those. If your screenwriting career would benefit from meeting Oscar winners, working writers, producers, agents, managers, and instructors, come to ScriptFest, May 20th to the 22nd in Burbank, California. The only nonprofit operating in Los Angeles, London, and Canada, ScriptFest was created by screenwriters for screenwriters. Be your own protagonist and come to pitch to more than 120 companies. Visit www.scriptfest.com for details and use coupon code SYS15 to save 15% off any of our Pitch Fest packages if you order before April 20th. Again, please visit scriptfest.com. That's www.scriptfest.com. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast and then look for episode 120. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a quick few words about what I'm working on. So once again, and this is probably going to be like a broken record here for the next few months, I'm working on my crime action thriller, The Pinch. I got a draft of the script that I'm happy with. The last couple of weeks I've been doing a rewrite on the script, just trying to polish it up. I'll probably, there'll be some more tweaks, but I'm pretty close. I'd say I'm pretty close to the final shooting script. But as I said, there's always going to be some tweaks, but I'm getting very close to basically you lock it in final draft, you create scene numbers, and then it becomes kind of like a shooting script. And then if you make changes, you start doing it in a particular way so you can see where those changes were made, and the production people will start getting that version of the script. So I'm real close to kind of locking the script. Again, there's always going to be tweaks made. There'll be tweaks made, on the day of the production and shooting and all that, but pretty close on that. So now I'm officially moving into pre-production. This week, I would say, is kind of my first real full week of pre-production. Right now, I'm planning on shooting the film in July. That date has become a pretty firm date. Early part of July going all the way to the end of July is going to be a 3-week shoot. I'm not sure of the exact day we'll start, but early part of July to the end of July. It might move a little bit, as I said, within a couple of days. Probably after the July 4th holiday. So we're talking, July 7th, 8th, 9th, probably starting somewhere in that range. I've got a few people on board coming to help that have volunteered to come and help on some of the positions. So I want to get those people locked up and start to actually give them firm dates. So I'd say that July date right now is looking very, very firm. I'm starting to work with my cinematographer. He's actually a guy that I met through the podcast. He was listening to the podcast. He reached out to me. He's a filmmaker himself, a writer, director himself, and he's also a cinematographer. So I'm bringing him on board. Hopefully we'll finalize that this week and start really working with him. I need to do a shot list. I need he's much more experienced, on set experience than myself. So I'll definitely be working with him. As I said, this is my first time actually directing something, so I'll be working with him and relying on him for a lot. He's written and directed and obviously been the cinematographer on feature films before. So it's great to have someone with experience who I can kind of rely on that. And as I said, it's someone I just met through the podcast. He reached out to me and said he was listening, and this was during the Kickstarter campaign, and he sent me a link to a movie that he had done, which I thought was excellent. And so we just kind of got a conversation going, and now it looks like he's going to come on and basically be the cinematographer of this film. So if you have production experience and you live in the Los Angeles area, please do drop me a line if you want to work on this film. I'm going to need all the help I can get. As I've been chronicling this along, the total budget is $25,000, and pretty much that covers the hard cost. You start to do the math on like the food. It's like there's almost $5,000 worth of food just to feed the cast and crew for 15 days. It's going to be a 15-day shoot, so it'll be 3 weeks. You need just physical hard items. You need a bunch of hard drives to store all the footage on. Those cost a couple $1,000s. There is some props that you're going to need. I'm going to spend maybe a little bit of money on location. So you start to add up the money that the $25,000, and it's like it just barely covers the hard cost. So there's not going to be a lot of money to pay people. Hopefully I'll get some people that just want the credits, that just want to be a part of the project, and that's really what I'm going to ultimately be relying on for this film. Just a lot of people just I'm going to be asking people basically for favors. So if you have any production experience and you would and you live in the Los Angeles area and you'd be willing to volunteer, please do just reach out to me. I'm getting ready to fill pretty much every position that AD, second AD, production, PAs. I'll be pretty much from top to bottom. I'll be looking for people. Right now, I'd say the main position I'm looking to fill is a production designer, and I need to get that person on pretty much ASAP, because they need to break down the script and start working on all the props. And that's obviously a big thing. There's not hugely elaborate props in this script, but there is some things, some guns, there's some knives, a couple of cars that we need to work through. So I just need to bring on a production designer who's basically going to break down this script and then start to work on getting those props. As I said, there is a little bit of a budget for getting some of these props, but this will be an unpaid, it would be a copy credit and meals. There might be a gas stipend, so we will be able to help out, a little bit on gas and that kind of stuff, but it'd basically be an unpaid position. So if you know anyone or you've had any production designer experience yourself, by all means, reach out to me. I'm also starting to look for the locations. There's basically 4 locations in this script. There's a couple of, they're driving on the street or something like that, but there's basically 4 locations. There's an office setting, and there's 2 different offices, but I think the one is just a woman talking on the phone in a cubicle. So my guess is if I can find like an office setting, I can kind of cheat that and combine, even though there'll be separate locations in the movie, I could probably cheat that and just do one location. And it's an office setting and needs one kind of like a master office that we can shoot in, and then a reception area, and then, as I said, a cubicle area as well that kind of looks a little bit different, or is at least sort of off to the corner, so it won't necessarily be in the other shots. But we only need that for 1 day, maybe 2 days at the most. So that's kind of the smallest location. Then I need 2 apartments. I might be able to double up and use the same apartment, make them look different, but I don't think so, because one of them is like a kind of a really low rent, almost flop house type of an apartment. One of them is kind of more of like a middle class, just your normal middle class apartment. The middle class apartment, we need to shoot in the elevator, in the stairs, in the hallway, and then the underground garage. That actually plays a pretty big part of it, as well as the car pulling out of the garage. So a little bit of specifics with that. Then there's the main location. So that's 2 locations, the office and the 2 apartments. And then the main location for the movie is a house preferably someplace in the San Fernando Valley. I live in the San Fernando Valley. A lot of the cast and crew that I'm already starting to talk with is in the San Fernando Valley. So ideally that is where the house will be. It needs to have a pretty big garage. And the garage has to be pretty much empty, because a lot of the action takes place in the garage. It's pretty contained, but we need to be able to move around and shoot quite a bit in the garage. So that's kind of the one stipulation. I can probably work around just about anything else that the house might have in terms of like a living room, bathroom, bathroom, we can probably sort of fudge that or just rewrite the script to make all that work. But it has to have, I would say, a 2-car garage, and the garage needs to basically be empty. It's not a house that the garage can't be filled with boxes. I mean, the garage basically has to be empty so that we can pull our car in and then shoot around that car nicely. A 2-car garage would probably be big enough and give us plenty of room to work. So if you know anybody, again, if you know anybody that might have these locations, again, I do have a little bit of a budget for the locations. That is something we're spending a little bit of money on. Or if you have experience and are willing to donate a little time, again, it's going to be in July. Please do reach out to me, info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. Even if you just have some ideas or some websites. I've gotten some websites from people that list locations, so I'll be going through those. But any help or ideas that you have, by all means, just reach out to me. Again, that's info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. So that's kind of what I'm working on. I had a question this past week via email from a screenwriter, and I thought it was just worth talking about in a podcast episode. I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, and I think it's something that we see a lot of. The screenwriter was in contact with a producer, and the producer was looking for crime thrillers that were based on true stories. This writer had a crime thriller, but it wasn't based on a true story, so he was just wondering if he should submit his screenplay or not. I once optioned a creature feature thriller script. I take that back. I optioned it was a horror thriller script to a producer who wanted stories based on famous novels, or at least based on like literary works, something that was somewhat famous. My script was not based on any famous novel. It was just a spec script that I wrote. So basically me and this producer just were on a phone call. We just started racking our brains about what novel, in the canon of great American novels, what novel could we kind of loosely tie this to? And a novel that I actually read many years ago was a novel called Tai P by Herman Melville. It's obviously a less famous book by Herman Melville, but it was about basically a bunch of cannibals in an island on the South Pacific, and my script was about a bunch of cannibals in the remote hills somewhere here in the United States. So there was a little bit of a tie-in, sort of that cannibal angle, and so we were like, yeah, we could use this. And, that's kind of backtracking. It's not necessarily something you would think about, but this producer, he was looking to submit this to some production companies, and that's specifically what they were looking for. They wanted that angle of, based on a famous book. Obviously, Tai P by Herman Melville is in the public domain. It was written, hundreds of years ago. I think it was written in the 1800s. And so it's in the public domain, so you don't have a rights issue. And, it was obviously, it's a pretty loose connection. It's a pretty, you'd say loosely based on Tai P, I'd say. But you could probably get away with saying, based on Tai P, by Herman Melville, just to kind of tie that in. And the key is to just look at it from the producer's angle. In the case of my producer, he was pitching this screenplay, this story, to a TV network that wanted like a low budget horror thriller script, and they wanted them based on some sort of a famous novel. And if you again look at it from the producer's angle, and then ultimately from this production company's angle, they had done some other movies that again were loosely based on some novels that people had heard of by some authors that people had heard of, and those films, by whatever metrics they used on their network, those movies had been a success. So that's kind of what they were trying to do, is sort of shoehorn a few other projects in that same sort of model that they already had working. They had a model that worked, so they just wanted to get more projects in there. But they honestly, they didn't care about the book that it was based on or being, true to the book. It's just purely for them, it's just purely a hook that they needed for their marketing. And so the fact that it was kind of a little bit of a backtread probably wouldn't have bothered them at all, as long as you could say, based on, Tai P by Herman Melville. I mean, Herman Melville is certainly someone that most of us have heard about. So you get that sort of marketing hook. Nothing ever happened with this project. And I don't really know what the TV network said to this producer who I optioned the script to, but the point is that sometimes you can backtrack on these things. So always keep that in mind. You can always kind of be a little bit creative. If you have a crime script and you can find a true story that's even a little bit like your screenplay, then you might be able to make the claim too is, based on a true story. And there's different sort of things, inspired by a true story is kind of, I would say, a lesser one, but you might be able to get away with that, inspired by a true story, even though it's very, very loosely, and even though you're kind of backtracking on your script. I don't think, again, there might be a rights issue. If you're basing it on like a true crime story, you might want to be careful about the rights. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. So definitely check with a lawyer if you want to figure out, about rights and what you can use and what you can't use. That might be an issue. Again, in my case, it was not an issue because it was a book by Henry Melville that was written hundreds of years ago. So it wasn't an issue in my case, but you might want to talk to a lawyer, make sure that the rights are not going to be an issue, but you might be able to backtrack a little bit. And I don't know that, I think it would always be a good thing if you can say inspired by a true story or based on a true story. I think that would always help your pitch. I think for the most part, producers like those kinds of angles because it gives people a little bit of a marketing hook. And again, it can be very loose. And again, you'd want to talk to a lawyer to figure out how loose it needs to be so that you don't have to get the rights from the people involved. But it's just something to think about. Again, be creative. Obviously, you would want to be honest with the producer that you're working with so that he understood kind of what was going on. He wasn't necessarily blindsided down the road. If your script was vastly different, but loosely based on it. So, you want to be honest with the producer. And as I said, me and my producer were literally on a phone call racking our brains for this, trying to come up with this. So he understood exactly what we were doing. And you do want to be upfront with the producer so he's not blindsided about it. But again, think about your stories and think about if there's not some other angle to pitch them. Do a little Google, open up a Google, open up the Google website and do a little searching, and you might find something that actually can fit a story that maybe perhaps you've even already read something you've already written. So now let's move into the special segment. Today, as I mentioned, this is going to be the first of 2 reviews I'll be doing of Writer's first 5 pages. The writer sent me 5 pages, the first 5 pages of their script. I then read it. I've given them basically the notes that I'm about to just read off. I've sent them also to the writer, so she already has those. But I'm going to be doing 2 of these. 2 people contributed at this level during my Kickstarter campaign, so this is the first of 2. I hope people find it valuable and would just kind of go in and get into it now. I have posted a link in the show notes to a PDF of these first 5 pages. So if you want to go get that and click on it, it might be a little bit, give you a little more context if you've actually read these pages. I don't think you necessarily need to read them, but if you want to, I'd have made that available to you, and it might help you get a little bit more context. So this is a script called Mosquito Harbor. It's written by a writer named Catherine. I'm going to just start out with a quick summary of the first 5 pages so that you kind of understand what the story is about. The writer, first off, the writer was nice enough to post their logline at the top of page 1. Obviously, you wouldn't do this when you submit your script anywhere, but I appreciate that the writer did do this in this case because she knew that I was always going to be reading the first 5 pages. So posting a logline is actually not a bad thing to do. I'll just read the logline so that you kind of understand what she was going for. The logline is: a prominent doctor in a Maine coastal town harbors a secret that, if revealed, could tarnish his reputation and that of his infant son. So now I'm going to just quickly review the first 5 pages of the script for you, and then I will get into my notes. So the script openings, the opening slug line of the script gives us the year. It takes place in 1862. That's going to be very important. On page 1, some fishermen are out in the ocean coming in towards harbor, a couple of islands, and they find a body in the water. The body is of a woman dressed in red. Then we cut to a doctor who is our protagonist, Nathan Fletcher. He walks along the beach, and he sees a reflection of a woman in the water, and the reflection says to him, "I want to keep my baby." This isn't like a supernatural thing, and it's not written like that at all. I just, as I was saying that, it just felt like maybe there was, like, I'm describing this thing as supernatural, and it's not supernatural at all, and that's important. And if you read the pages, you'll see the writer did not intend it to be supernatural at all. It's just kind of a memory of the protagonist. So then at the bottom of page 1, we have a little slug. It says 1 year earlier. So what we've seen is kind of a flash forward. Now we're going to go flash back and then build up to this scene and the body in the water. So then we cut to Nathan. He's at home. We meet his wife, Anne. Nathan tries to make love to his wife, but his wife gets angry and wants nothing to do with him. The next morning, Nathan finds a note from his wife. The note says she's gone to visit her family. We're then introduced to a woman named Stella. Who's 20 years old. She is on the beach dancing, and Nathan is watching her. We then cut to Captain Brewer's house, where Nathan talks with the captain, and we get some exposition here. The captain is leaving and wants Nathan to take his daughter, who is Stella, to school in Boston. And then we get a little bit of exposition from Nathan. He says sorry that he was not able to save Claire, and the impression is that Claire is the mother of Stella and the deceased wife of this captain. So then we go we're onto a ship with Stella and Nathan. There's a scene with them interacting, and then there is a storm, and eventually the two of them end up kissing and falling into bed together. So that's basically a wrap up of those first 5 pages. So again, the writer included the logline, so I thought for a minute we could just discuss this specific logline. I think this logline actually has some issues with it that I think are very typical, so I think it would be worth, I review a lot of loglines over the years. I've reviewed, dozens, hundreds, if not thousands of these loglines coming through the SYS Select forum, so I think I have a pretty good sense of kind of what some typical problems are, and I keep meaning to write a blog post that really goes into this into depth, but I thought that this logline has some common issues that I think are worth addressing. So, and the main issue I have with this logline, and I think again it's a very common issue that I see with a lot of logline, is this logline is simply too vague. It's just a really good, when I read a really good logline, you're able to kind of see the story in your head. You kind of understand what the story is all about, and it feels like a movie. This one is just way, way, way too vague. I don't really understand. You don't really understand any of the details. It's just way too vague. So as an example of something that's too vague, it says, the secret, the logline is, if revealed, it's a prominent doctor in Maine coastal town harbors a secret that, if revealed, could tarnish his reputation. So, what is that secret? The more details you can give us, the better off we're going to be. Even if you don't tell us exactly what it is, at least hint at it so we have some idea as sort of the tone and the scope of the movie. And the problem, and as I said, the reason, at least for me, that I'm not able to visualize this movie in my head and kind of you just sort of feel like you can see it as a movie, is because I don't sort of know what the tone and the scope is. Is the doctor a witch doctor with magical spells to cast? So this is like some sort of like a Harry Potter type of a story, or is it, an infant son? Maybe this infant son is a vampire, so it's a horror movie, or is part of this, it's an alien race preparing to take over the world in some sort of Men in Black meets Independence Day sort of thing. And think about what I just did. I just laid out some possibilities for this story, some just random possibilities that are completely different. And, ultimately this story is about an illegitimate son and sort of the consequences in a small town in the 1800s. And that's a big difference between, a Harry Potter type of a story, or, Men in Black meets Independence Day. Those are like worlds apart, but we can't tell from this logline which one it is. And that's a big problem. Like, you've got to be, and if you can get sort of those elements into the logline, then all of a sudden people can kind of get a sense, oh, okay, I understand what this movie's about. We don't even know that this is a period piece. And again, I think that has to be, we have to understand that this is a period piece in the logline. And again, these are all these points about this logline are all sort of just dovetailing into the next point. So my next big issue with the logline is if we understand what the secret is, and we understand the time and the place that this is a period piece, we'll have sort of more stakes. The stakes will all of a sudden of this movie will be more clear. And, what I mean by that is the way the logline is laid out. And again, just looking at the logline, a prominent doctor, harbors a secret that, if revealed, could ruin his reputation and the reputation of his son. And it's like, that doesn't feel like very big stakes. And again, part of the issue is that we don't know that it's 1862. If we know that it's in 1862, we understand that having an illegitimate son is a much bigger deal. You can't just pack up and move. It's not that easy to move back then to another town. But not understanding sort of the scope of this movie and the tone of this movie, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of stakes. Losing one's reputation doesn't feel like that big of a deal from an illegitimate child. You don't really feel like that's a big deal unless you know that it's 1862, a rural, town in 1862. And again, understanding what that secret is, being the illegitimate child, will enhance that, plus then knowing what the year is. Those two things combined, giving real specifics of understanding what the secret is and understanding what the year is. Those two things will give us some stakes. And again, it will start to bring this thing down to like concrete terms. We'll understand sort of what this script is. And again, there's going to be some producers that don't want a period piece, but at least people will know what they're in for. And it's kind of like, when they read the log line, if they don't know what to think, they're just going to sort of pass on to it. There's going to be a certain number of producers that are open to reading a period piece. And those, when they read it and they know that's what it's about, those are the people you're trying to hit. In general, too, it's nice to understand sort of the dramatic question. You're telling, the writer is telling us from this logline that the main dramatic question is about a doctor struggling to keep a secret. I mean, it's, in and of itself, it doesn't sound like a great device for a movie. It's a very reactive goal. The protagonist is just kind of reacting. He's trying to just prevent, presumably the antagonist, from accomplishing his goal, which is revealing the secret. So it's a very sort of a defensive goal for a protagonist in a movie. So it doesn't sound like it's that great of a goal for a protagonist. And, again, think about something like The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy trying to get home. That's basically her goal in The Wizard of Oz. She's trying to get home. And that's a very proactive goal. She is the one out trying to get home. When you read this logline, you're thinking, okay, I mean, what is this? Literally, this guy's going to hide in a closet for 2 hours trying to prevent people from uncovering the secret. Again, that doesn't sound like, and it's not that the script is flawed, because that's not what this is really about. If you just reverse it a little bit and think about what his real goal is, I think then you can remove that, you can remove that bit, tell us what his goal really is, and it's probably already baked into the screenplay. If you get more specific with the antagonist other than just the coastal town, I think that would help as well. Then hopefully, we'll understand sort of the dramatic conflict, and the antagonist's goal will hopefully be in direct conflict to the protagonist. And again, by bringing this out and making this more specific, coming up with a specific protagonist and that goal, it can play off of your protagonist's goal. And that can really, again, we can see the conflict. Right now, we're not exactly sure what the conflict, I guess the conflict is, someone trying to uncover this secret. But again, that doesn't seem like the greatest of stakes or the greatest of conflict. So anyways, that's enough about the logline. That's just one sentence. And so let's go ahead and move into the actual critique of these 5 pages. So the writing, the thing that I think this writer did very, very well is her writing is very, very clear and concise. I can really see what's happening on the page, the way she lays out everything with the slug lines and then her description. It's all well written, and I'm never like wondering like what just happened. I mean, sometimes you read scripts and you just literally can't understand like what's going on, like what's the action, what's sort of the geography of the scene. And this writer clearly is very visual in the way she's thinking about this, because everything's laid out nicely. I never wonder like, well, where is this? She gives some great descriptions of the houses and the which gives us a good sort of feel of this 1800s. Just the way she describes stuff, the boats and the way people are sort of interacting and the way people are doing, you get a real good sense of that it's in the 1800s. Again, I'm never confused kind of by that. Very, very concise. So that's all great stuff. And I really applaud the writer for doing that very, very well. So my first note is that there's not really a lot happening on these first 5 pages, but a lot should happen. There is a good bit of action and things kind of sort of do happen, but there's not a lot of subtlety to it or understanding. I mean, it's a husband fights with the wife, a husband cheats on his wife, but we don't really dig into sort of the complexities of the relationships. And I think we need to. I think what's actually on this page, what's on these pages, you could probably, or the writer could probably cut this down to like 2.5 pages. But, and that will, and I'm going to get into some other notes, but, so let's leave it at that. That's my first note, that just more stuff. There should be more understanding of, and it's not the action. I think I'm kind of, it's not the action. Like there's plenty of things happening, but there should be more understanding of sort of the relationships in these first 5 pages. So another thing I want to mention is this trope, and this is right on page 1. I want to mention this sort of convention of, having a quick scene and then doing, this 1 year ago, sort of a flashback. I'm not sure what that's called, but you see it sometimes in movies. But I would consider not doing this I would specifically consider not doing this to this writer of these pages. But if you're considering doing it with your own script, again, you open with a flash forward, and then after 1 or 2 pages, you have, 1 year earlier or 1 week earlier or something. And again, it's something you do occasionally see in movies, but if you listen to the John August podcast script notes, they will occasionally do what they call a 3-page challenge. And it's actually where I got the idea for doing this. But it's a running joke between John August and the other fellow that is the host of the show. It's a running joke between them. That writers do this. Like half the scripts that show up to have the same convention. So it's very, very much overused. So unless you can really do it in an original creative manner, I would not do it. And that goes for, people listening and also the writer of these pages. I don't think you really need it. I don't think these pages really need it. There's not that much mystery or suspense set up in that first page. So I just don't think it's really needed. I think you need to spend the time, as I said, developing those characters. So I felt like the pages were, again, moving on to another note, I felt like the pages were a little clunky and there was too many slug lines and establishing shots, and it just felt a little bit overwritten. Again, I felt like the writing was super clear, which is good, but I felt like the writer could really go through and cut a lot of this stuff down just to make it more concise, just to have less words on the page, hopefully without losing any of that sort of clarity that the writer has. So obviously that's kind of maybe a tough challenge, but there was a couple of scenes, and I just wrote down some of these scenes. There was an interior Nathan Fletcher's home bedroom day. Nathan stands at the bureau mirror, dressed, combing his hair, inspects himself before he has his room. It's like, I don't know that we really need that. We kind of get that, the sort of the subtlety around that scene. We kind of get it already. So I would cut these scenes. There was another scene. Let me see here. There was a bunch of scenes that I think the writer could really go through and just cut. Really ask yourself, and again, this goes for everybody, including myself. Really go through those first 5, 10, 15 pages, really the whole script, but especially those first 12 pages, let's say. And ask yourself, what would happen if this scene was just completely removed? Would it really confuse my readers? And in many cases, you're going to find that it doesn't. So the next note I have is about exposition. I would say, especially in the first 12 pages, you've got to be real careful. You want to keep things moving. And I would say as little exposition as possible, especially in these first 5 pages. And I'm going to get to sort of some of the reasons why in a minute. But for instance, there was a scene where the Nathan says something to the effect of, he says he's talking to the captain. There's a scene where he's talking to the captain. The captain says, "Take my daughter to school in Boston." And then Nathan just sort of out of nowhere says, "I'm sorry I couldn't save Claire for you and Stella." And, you want to be real careful with exposition, especially you want to be real careful with it at any point, but especially in the first 5 pages. These pages are very, very precious. And especially in this context, I mean, I understand the writer's trying to get some sort of backstory out, but it felt very on the nose. It didn't feel organic. It didn't feel like something that person would really say in the moment. So it kind of brings you out of the story. And I think if you have some of that exposition, you want it to be organic. You want it to make sense. But I think we can get some of that backstory later on, when it sounds like he's going to start, he make love to Stella at the end of these pages. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to talk to Stella about some of these things, or even maybe the captain later on, and hopefully in a more natural setting. Ordinary People is a script. This is obviously, the mother died. Maybe she died in childbirth. We're not quite sure, but she died. And so now there's this backstory. Ordinary People is a great film. I think it's from the early 80s. It's about a family coping with the death of a son. It's considered kind of a classic screenplay. Highly recommend it if you've never read it or haven't seen the movie. And the first 5-10 pages, you don't get any of the specifics of that this family has lost a son. You understand that people are coping with a horrible situation. You understand something bad has happened, but it's not at all on the nose. It's not, it's not, there's no real exposition. You just kind of see how these people are reacting. And I think that's a great model, especially, again, for your first 5 or 10 pages. Be very, very precious and really I guess if you could get it in naturally, maybe it's okay. But I probably would really tend to shy away from a lot of exposition early on in the script. You want to develop the characters. And getting into my next note really is kind of the core, I would say the most important thing. The scene on page 2 between Anne, the wife, and Nathan kind of confused me. At first, she seemed to be a little bit into having sex with him. Then she stopped and was annoyed. I wasn't really sure what happened. I read the scene a couple of times and I couldn't really figure out the subtext of what happened. And he just kind of rolled on top of her. Seems like they were going to start to have sex. And then all of a sudden she got annoyed, pushed him off, and was very, very annoyed and just kind of sent him packing. And I wasn't really sure what had transpired between them. Obviously there's some backstory here. Again, I don't necessarily think you need to talk about on the nose dialogue where they're talking about their backstory, but I think that this scene needs to be more clearly defined. I'm not sure, and the reason is because I'm not sure if Nathan's being a jerk trying to pressure his wife into having sex, or I'm not sure if Anne is being a jerk. It just was not clear. And then later when Nathan cheats on Anne with Stella, I'm kind of thinking, well, is Nathan a jerk here? Or maybe at the same time, maybe he's justified. Maybe his wife is a jerk and maybe he's not so bad. And again, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel for, mainly it's Nathan, but I think in order for us to feel for Nathan, I think you're also going to need to develop the character of Anne. And maybe it's Nathan, but I think both of those characters, you've got to really figure out those characters and the situation and make us actually have some feelings for them. And again, this is probably the biggest issue I have with these pages, and probably I would say the biggest note, the most important note that I'm giving on these pages, and the biggest note that people can take away from listening to this podcast. One thing you must do with your opening pages is establish with your audience how they should feel. Really evoke some genuine emotions for the characters in your story. If you do nothing else and you just do that, you'll be in pretty good shape. And what I mean by that is, like an actual clear example here. Right now, I'm unclear how to feel towards Nathan. I'm not sure if he's a jerk for cheating on his wife, or if his wife is just a super bitch and he's justified to be cheating on his wife. And we've got to be absolutely clear on that. And sometimes you've got to make that a little bit on the nose, and you've got to really define those characters clearly so that the audience is not wondering who is the jerk here and who is the one that is the good guy and the bad guy. I'm just left wondering. And it's not like these characters are well enough defined that you can make an argument for either one of them. They're just not well enough defined. The situation and the relationship between them is not clear enough that we can accurately discern how we're supposed to feel towards these two characters. And I think that is just so important. Again, another example, another script that came to mind as I was just writing up my bullet points for this section was Unforgiven. That's a great Clint Eastwood movie. You might have to read the first 12 or 15 pages, but one of the things that impresses me about that script is that it's so clear in the first, I think it's about maybe 10 pages. It's the first sort of opening segment with the prostitute. She gets her face cut. Gene Hackman comes in and basically issues a punishment for the guy. And it's so clear how we as the audience are supposed to feel about each one of the characters. The characters are just so clearly defined. There is the whore with the heart of gold. She's the whore that's speaking up and really pissed that, this guy's cut her friend and is not going to get punished. There's the bad cowboy who did the cutting. He's clearly defined as kind of an evil, bad person. There is the other cowboy who's kind of very sorry about the whole situation, didn't really do anything. And this is all going to be important, but we understand that he's sort of conflicted himself. He's defined well enough. And again, this is like, there's like 5 characters that are really well defined in about 10 pages. And we as the audience, we know how we're supposed to feel with them. Then there's the owner of the whorehouse. He's very business minded. He doesn't really care about what happened to his girl. He just cares about the potential lost income. And so he's trying to get the whore with the heart of gold. He's trying to get her to quiet down. And then the Gene Hackman character, he's the local sheriff of the town. He comes in, and you can see his just sort of, I would say, amorality. He just has really no morality, and is just issues sort of his decree of, we'll give the guy a little bit of a whipping. And it does not seem, the punishment does not seem to fit the crime. So we as the audience are definitely on the prostitute's side. We really feel like they've been wronged. And obviously, it's good writing on the page. It's clearly written and all of that stuff. It's a professional screenplay. But the key is not the good writing on the page. Hopefully, that will be a part of the solution here. But the key is choosing the right situation. And the writer had to choose a situation that would highlight each one of these characters' point of view very, very clearly. And it would highlight them give them conflicting points of view. And that's the real, I would say, the magic of writing. And it's really, really hard. I mean, you have to be so smart about what you choose as your opening scene. And it's not a function of like opening final draft and crafting that perfect sentence. You've got to do the work before you even open final draft. And you've got to figure out what is a situation or a scene that is going to really, really define these characters. And all of these characters, it's not just one character, but it's all 5 of these characters that are in this situation. And that's a really tough thing to do, but it's not like wordsmithing, crafting the perfect sentence or the perfect character description. It's before that. It's in figuring out what is a situation that's going to define this. And in this particular example of the script, it's going to be about finding a moment that really defines Anne and Nathan's relationship, finding that moment where we as an audience understand what that relationship is, and we feel bad for Nathan. We know from kind of reading all of this that Nathan is ultimately the protagonist, and we're going to have to be on his side. So I think it's a matter of really making the Anne character kind of almost evil or really bad, and making that Nathan character, we need to feel bad for him so that when he cheats on his wife, we don't just think that this guy is a jerk. It's not an easy thing to do, and that's what's difficult. But you've got to sit back and think about your opening pages. And again, it's not like hitting writing. It's a matter of, I would say, going for a walk and mulling over your options and coming up with lots of ideas and picking the one idea that really exemplifies this relationship between your characters. Okay, so that's my review of the first 5 pages of Mosquito Harbor. I hope that the writer got some very specific help from me doing this, and I hope people just in general listening to this, I hope they found it helpful as well. Feel free to give me some feedback. Send me an email and just say, yeah, I like the 5 pages. I didn't like it. I'm always looking for new things to do on the podcast. So if people found this helpful, I could potentially do more of it. If people don't find it helpful, I won't do more of it. But, feel free. If you thought this was a really good section of the podcast or a really bad section, if you had a strong feeling one way or another, please do just drop me a line, because I'd be curious to know what people thought. Okay, so now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Max Landis. Here is the interview. Welcome, Max, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored to be on this show.
So let's go ahead and let's dig into your latest film, Mr. Right, starring Anna Kendrick and Sam Rockwell. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or logline for the film.
It's about a emotionally unstable, sort of weirdo woman who meets a very sweet, funny guy who she has a lot of chemistry with, only to discover that he is insane and discover her own insanity through him.
Perfect. So this was a spec script, correct?
Yeah, it was actually my first spec script 7 years ago to get me any kind of heat.
Huh. Okay. So let's dig into it a little bit. Where did this idea, what was sort of the genesis of this idea?
I was in bed with my girlfriend at the time, and she wanted to go to work. And I was like, wouldn't it be funny if a movie started with a girl catching a guy cheating on her and then trying to turn that into a threesome? And she was like, that would be funny. So she went to shower, and I wrote the first scene, and which has gone through many iterations in those 7 years. But when she came back, she was like, this is funny, 3 pages. And I was like, well, here, wait, I'll keep writing. So she got back into bed, and I would sit, and she sat sort of in between my legs and with the laptop on her feet, and I would write for her. And I did it for about 3 hours, and we got about to page 40, and then she had to go to work because she called out of lunch. And so then she, later in that day, she came home, and I knew she was coming home at 6 p.m., so I was like, I should try to finish as much of this as I can before she gets home. And so I got to about page 70, and I just kept sort of just winging it. It's just about limerence. It's about people enjoying each other. And I wanted to build in a lot of sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to build in a lot of things that you don't generally see in movies, especially movies about, the sort of corny same old movie about a romantic hitman movie. Mm-hmm. And so there are moments in this movie that I think are from the script that are very unique, that I'm very proud of. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of where the inspiration came.
When did the idea of having a hitman, because obviously the opening scene really has nothing to do with sort of the hitman story. When did that inspiration of putting in a hitman come into it? Just in this 3 hours as you're writing the first 40 pages?
Yeah, I thought it would be really funny if there was a hitman who decided not to be a hitman, but was still notorious enough that people still tried to hire him, and now he kills people who try to hire him because murder is wrong.
Mm-hmm. And I
thought that was really funny.
Yeah. And so that's just all within this sort of 3 hour period you came up with that, because that's kind of the main story really, is sort of him and getting hired by the gangsters. And that all came just in this 3 hour period as you're actually writing.
I really don't feel like that's the main A story. I feel like maybe you can feel differently, but the main A story for me is their relationship. I mean, much more screen time is spent on them just dicking around and dating than is spent on the gangsters.
Yeah. That's fair. I guess as the script goes along, like the back half of the script is pretty much all devoted to that whole subplot of getting the gangster's brother and all that stuff.
Yeah, but he doesn't give a fuck about that. Neither does she. It's like it's an experiment in writing an action film in which the leads are completely disinvested from the action plot.
Mm-hmm. So now, is this typical of your process? You just kind of come up with an idea and start writing? I always like to just dig into sort of the process of the screenwriters have on. And a lot of the screenwriters have on, they have an extensive outlining period. Obviously, if you wrote the first 70 pages in one day, there wasn't a lot of time for outlining. Is this indicative of how you typically write spec scripts?
Yeah, I wrote Bright in about 2 weeks. I wrote Deeper in 2 days. Frankenstein took me 2 months. Chronicle took me a week. American Ultra took me a month and a half. It's different. Every story is different. I've been working on this script Quintessence for almost 2 years. Every story, I don't set times, and I only outline if the story is complicated. And if you read my scripts, they're generally, I think, the reason I'm successful, if I could pin down one reason. In terms of actually selling things, not just getting meetings, is that my scripts are very fun to read and they flow. And that's because I have a lot of fun writing.
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty high concept. I mean, it's, Jason Bourne meets the romantic comedy. So don't you think that there's a pretty high concept hook that you have in Mr. Right?
Yeah, sure. I'd say yes, but I'd say the movie itself is very weird. Despite having a very high concept, it is a strange movie with very strange characters. But yes, I almost always try to write high concept, simple to explain movies with a twist.
So now, again, let's just talk about sort of your process of coming up with ideas. Is there any vetting process? Like, I mean, it sounds like this just inspiration struck and you just, opened up the laptop and started writing. Is there any sort of like thinking, well, maybe this thing wouldn't sell? Do you come up with a bunch of ideas that you don't actually write?
I do now. I didn't used to. Every time I used to have a movie, every time I used to have an idea for a movie, I'd write it. And that's why I'm on 95 features now. I just finished 95, the script Higher, last week, and that took me 2 weeks. But I do have many ideas that I don't pursue now because I've developed, I don't want to sound, I guess this doesn't sound boastful, but I've developed an ear for what sells. And sometimes I'll get an idea for a movie, and I think that's a movie that I think is cool, but I don't know if anybody else is ready to think that movie is cool, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there any vetting process? Is there any vetting process with your agents and managers? Do you pitch these ideas to friends and see how they react to them?
Well, they're my friends, so they're always pretty positive, and I'm good at pitching, so I can, with enough enthusiasm and enough detail and enough jokes, you can make a bad idea sound great. Or you can make a great idea that wouldn't be sellable sound like a movie they want to see. Online, you can find me pitching movies with the caveat that they are unsellable, but it doesn't mean they might not be in the marketplace, but they're cool movies. There used to be a very, very intense vetting process where every week I would send my manager a list of, 5 to 15 ideas that I'd had, and she would look at them and say none of these or one of these. And funnily enough, one of the ideas she said wouldn't sell was Bright. And I believed in it, and I thought this will sell, and so I wrote it anyway. But most of the time, I trust her, and I believe in the process. And you can't try to write something that will sell. That's a fool's errand, trying to write a script that will sell, because it's just not. It won't be fun. I get all this shit, from other writers about how you write so fast or how do you complete things without outlines. And I get a lot of shit about that, but it's because I love writing. I don't play video games. I don't have any other hobbies. In my spare time, I am not dicking around. My version of dicking around is I have a story to finish. And I've been tremendously blessed in that has become my job. It certainly beats when I was working at McDonald's.
Yeah. So do you ever get those moments where it just becomes like work and it's, like banging your head against the wall?
I mean, sometimes during rewrites, yeah, of course. Sometimes during rewrites it gets incredibly hard. But that's because I'm playing with someone else's toys. Whenever I'm playing with my own toys and I'm just writing for me, it's a fucking wild ride. I just have the best time. And I think that often comes across in my scripts, is how much fun I'm having.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Hey, don't touch that. Hold on. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. I'm sorry. I'm in my office, and my friend just came in, and he's messing with my lights. Don't fucking... Sorry. Okay.
No problem. So let's talk about craft.
In there turning on and off my lights.
Let's talk a bit about craft with Mr. Wright. What were some of the challenges that you faced just as a screenwriter going into this script?
Well, going into it, none. But after it finally sold and was getting made, a lot. We had to tremendously cut down the action, which was hard. We had to rewrite for locations since we had so much less money for locations. We had to cut down entire plot elements were cut down or removed, or minimalized or shrunken. And of course I missed some of them, and some of them were right to go. I had to change the ending because the entire production team felt like the ending was too sort of just sweet romantic comedy. They wanted it to be more action. It was interesting. You know, it's just another, it was also hard for me to go back and revisit myself as a young writer in a lot of ways, because my writing had changed tremendously since Mr. Right, in a lot of meaningful ways. It was a wild ride doing Mr. Right. There was a lot of challenges and compromises for the budget.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask about was, you know, it's you essentially have a superhero at the center of the story. I mean, this guy is literally dodging bullets from a sniper. And one of the things that I think people always are challenged with a movie like this is, how do you give a movie like this actual real stakes when you basically have a guy that you know is going to be able to survive virtually anything that gets thrown at him?
Well, have you seen the film?
I did, yes.
Do you recall how he ends up? He needs to be rescued by a random formerly bad guy thug, because he is unable to beat one of the villains. In fact, he doesn't kill any of the primary villains. They get the one up on him, take Martha. He is able to free Martha, but spoilers for those of you who haven't seen the movie, Martha saves herself and kills both of the primary bad guys. Despite being, I mean, like, if you don't feel like the scene where Martha's tied to the chair and she's being repeatedly hit in the face didn't have stakes, I mean, that's certainly more brutal than anything in that terrible movie, The Killers. You know, it's just a case of challenge. And if you watch my movies, characters are given very special skills and then put into situations like being hit in the side of the head with a baseball bat, which happens to midway through this movie, shot in the face, which happens to both of my leads in this movie. If you recall, Shotgun Steve gets the one up on him not once but twice. You know, he certainly suffers more than Rey in Star Wars The Force Awakens. You know, you talk about stakes. Most heroes, Bruce Willis in The Fifth Die Hard, are more and more indestructible. And I would challenge what you're saying gently and say, I mean, he gets out of the way of one bullet once. The rest of the movie, he's getting his ass kicked kind of a fair amount. He even takes punches from random thugs.
I guess he is. I mean, there's the one scene sort of in the middle of the movie where all the guys come to the woman's apartment, and you're right, he doesn't kill them, but he doesn't kill them by choice, and that kind of, he could have killed them, but he sort of chose not to, and that was kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, but then he gets shot in the face. The only reason he's not killed is because they gave him that old shotgun.
Yeah. So, okay, so what are you working on next?
A lot. I just finished a new spec called Higher. My spec called Deeper just got some fun attachments. Sort of, I think it's my best thing. My movie Bright is going into production at Netflix in September with David Ayer. I'm trying to only be involved in good movies from now on. I sort of had this weird arc career-wise where, because I was selling so many things in such a short time, I didn't really have any control whatsoever or any real enough experience in the film I directed to really put out the level of what I was going for. And I really love Chronicle, and I actually really love American Ultra, and I think Mr. Right is really a wild, fun ride. And the movie I directed, Me, Him, Her, I'm proud of. But I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for, I have my eye on a bigger ball. I want to be a really good filmmaker, and so I'm trying to spread my wings as much as I can while still keeping my career going. I've got my TV show that I'm an executive producer on, Channel Zero, coming out in October, and then also the TV show I'm calling you from the office of that I'm show running, Dirk Gently. My new spec will probably go out soon. I'm trying to, you know, I really, of all the screenwriters I know, I don't know what this means, but I work more, and I don't mean I get more work. I mean, I just write more. And if there's any kind of advice I can give to young writers or writers who are trying to sell their scripts, it's love it. Get in there and don't give up. If you love to tell stories, you need to tell stories, and that's what you want to do,
chase it. Never stop chasing it. Because the second you stop chasing it, or the second you go like, oh, this is too hard, or, oh, I'll never do it, you know, like, there are plenty of people who had their foot in the door even better than I did, and they haven't taken a step inside. And it's just work. You just got to put forth work. So please, I hope everyone listening to this, I hope you just sit down and you write it and you let yourself get excited about stories. That's what I'm working on next, is right now I want you, if you're listening to this and you're a writer, to know that even if Final Draft sits open on your laptop and you don't write anything in it and it's so daunting, you know what? Close Final Draft. Go out and get a coffee and just think about stories. Just think about stories all the time. Storytelling is going to be the last thing that humans can do that computers can't. So we need you. And just, you're awesome and good luck.
Yeah. So how can people see Mr. Wright? Do you know the release schedule for it?
I don't. I think it comes out on April 8th on on demand. It's funny. It's a funny movie.
Yeah. So, okay, well, I'll round all that up and I'll put that in the show notes. I always like to just wrap up the interviews by asking the guest if they care to share their Twitter handle, Facebook page, blog, anything you want to share so that people can kind of just keep up with what you're doing and follow along with your career.
Wait, what?
I just like to always end.
Signaling. You can follow me at Up to Movies on Twitter. It's a terrible experience.
Okay, perfect. I will get that and I'll put that in the show notes. And how about a blog? I think I saw that you had a blog as well. What's the URL for that?
A nice guy, I don't have a blog, but a nice guy collects my writing and puts it on a website called Max Landis Writes.
Oh, okay, perfect. So, sounds good, Max. Well, I appreciate your coming on and talking with me. Good luck with this film and all your other projects.
Thank you so much, dude. I hope this was helpful to someone.
It definitely was. So, I appreciate it.
Okay, have a good day.
You too. Talk to you later. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You could read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide analyses on features and television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this service to the analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer and director Michael Hurst. He wrote a contained sci-fi time travel thriller screenplay called Paradox, which he recently directed. We talked through his early career and how he got his first big break with a low-budget independent film. And then we talked specifically about this new film and kind of how he got that produced. So keep an eye out for that next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on something from today's interview with Max. When I asked Max about stakes, he seemed to be a little put off by the question, and I really didn't mean it that way. It wasn't, I wasn't sort of picking a fight with him. It wasn't a criticism of the film. I actually think this was a pretty entertaining movie, despite not really having any real stakes. And let me just explain that for a minute. Rom-coms as an example, rom-coms usually don't really have much in terms of stakes. I mean, we go into the movie basically knowing that the two people are going to end up happily ever after, but it's all about the journey and the highs and the lows of that journey. I mean, that's what life is. It's about a journey, not a destination. So that's kind of when we go into rom-coms, and this, I guess, could kind of be, I'm not really talking about those sorts of stakes with this, but the point is that, the stakes there's not necessarily any real stakes in a rom-com, even the best ones, because ultimately we kind of know that the two people are going to get together. It's just a part of the genre. I often hear people say Superman is a flawed protagonist because he doesn't have any flaws. And this is opposed to like someone like Batman, who is more human and has some flaws. But I don't really agree with that sentiment. The first Christopher Reeves Superman movie back in the late 70s, I really liked that as a film. I thought it was good. So to me, it's not, that, there's no stakes with something like Superman. It's more just about the execution of the script, the execution of the material. And that's what I think Max did really well with this script. I never felt like this guy was in any real danger. Again, as I mentioned to Max, I mean, he can literally dodge bullets. So from while I was watching it, I mean, yeah, there were some people taking shots at him, but you felt in a pinch he could probably just dive out of the way of the bullets because he's capable of doing that. So I never felt that this was like guy was in danger or he wasn't going to come out on top. But the thing that Max, I think, did really well was the action scenes were entertaining and funny and very, very original. And I think, to me, that's what worked about this movie, despite the fact that there wasn't really any danger or stakes for the protagonist or sort of the love interest as well. And again, this is not a criticism of the film. I'm just looking at sort of the mechanics of how this film worked, because I do think that the film basically worked. But again, I don't necessarily think that at least from my standpoint, I didn't sit around thinking, gee, I wonder if this guy is going to get killed, or gee, I wonder if this thing's not going to end up all right. He's literally like Superman in that he can dodge bullets from a sniper that he didn't even know was there. So you don't really get the sense that he's in any real danger. He's able to handle any situation, any number of bad guys. He's able to pretty much dispatch them. But it's about making those scenes original and fresh, playing with that sort of idea and making it entertaining and funny. And the action scenes, as I said, there's some really funny, original action scenes like you've never seen before. This guy's trying not to. He decides he doesn't want to kill people because his girlfriend doesn't want him to kill people. So he's kind of has to get out of this situation by shooting these guys in the leg, which he's able to do pretty easily. So again, very, very fresh and original. But again, I don't necessarily think that there's a lot of stakes involved. So check out the movie yourself, and you can kind of decide for yourself. But entertaining movie and worth checking out. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.